In the heart of the city, on the top floor of a slightly shabby building, lived Mrs. Patel. She had recently moved into a cramped bedsit, eager to make it her own. The lift was often out of order, leaving her to climb the stairs to the first floor where her small unit awaited. As she entered, she was greeted by a musty smell that permeated the air, a sign of damp that clung to the walls. Undeterred, Mrs. Patel set to work. The bedsit came furnished with only the essentials: a washing machine, a spin dryer, and a small dryer tucked away in a corner. The bathroom was equally compact, with just enough space for a shower and a hairdryer. Determined to transform her new home, Mrs. Patel rolled up her sleeves. She scrubbed away the filth that had accumulated, leaving the place looking presentable. The landlord had promised to insulate the walls soon, but for now, Mrs. Patel made do with thick curtains to keep out the cold. The bedsit had a tiny kitchenette, where she would lay the table for her solitary meals. Despite its size, it was convenient, with a small fridge tucked under the counter and a toaster for quick breakfasts. Weekends were spent tackling the chores that came with her new space. She would dust every nook and cranny, then wash her hair in the tiny sink, careful not to splash water everywhere. The bedsit may have been small, but Mrs. Patel took pride in keeping it tidy and welcoming. One day, while checking the letterbox at the landing, Mrs. Patel found a notice from the landlord. The building was due for refurbishment, and all tenants were required to move out temporarily. Disheartened, Mrs. Patel packed her belongings, bidding farewell to her small haven. Months passed, and Mrs. Patel found herself back on the top floor staring at the newly renovated bedsit. The roof had been repaired, an aerial installed for better reception, and a shiny new lawn mower sat in the communal garden below. Excitedly, Mrs. Patel unlocked the door to her refurbished home. The musty smell was gone, replaced by the fresh scent of paint. The bedsit felt spacious now, with cleverly designed storage solutions and modern appliances. With a sigh of contentment, Mrs. Patel settled back into her routine. No longer cramped for space, she reveled in the comfort of her second home. The chores seemed easier now, the kitchen a joy to cook in. As she sat at her newly laid table, enjoying a meal cooked in her renovated kitchen, Mrs. Patel reflected on her journey. From the initial move-in to the eviction notice and finally the return to a home in good repair, it had been a roller coaster. But through it all, she had remained a diligent housewife, tending to her bedsit with care. And now, as she looked out of the shuttered window at the bustling city below, Mrs. Patel couldn't help but feel a sense of pride.